She told me, "I can't help how I feel," while her texts to him were full of future plans. I stood there in the living room, my hands trembling as I stared at the screen of my phone. The messages were still fresh in my mind, and no matter how many times I read them, I couldn't make sense of it. There they were, the texts between her and him, plans for weekends away, mentions of future vacations, inside jokes that I'd never heard before, and worst of all, things she'd never said to me. Words like, "I can't wait to see you again," or, "When we're together, it feels like everything just makes sense." My breath hitched, and I tried to steady myself. Rachel was standing in front of me, her posture defensive but also exhausted, like she was trying to convince herself that everything she'd said and done wasn't as bad as it looked. She had just dropped the bomb on me. Her confession that she had developed feelings for someone else, someone I didn't know, and that she thought it was only fair to take a break so she could figure things out. She had been so calm, so collected when she said it, and I couldn't even remember what had come out of my mouth after that. But the messages were different. They were raw, they were real, and they weren't meant for me. I looked up from my phone, finally meeting her eyes. There was no anger in her face, no real guilt. Just that same resigned look that I had started to see more and more of in her lately. Like she had already made up her mind, like she was just waiting for me to catch up to her decision. I could feel the sting of betrayal like 1,000 needles in my chest. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing that made sense at that moment. "How long?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She blinked, as if she didn't understand the question at first. "How long what? How long have you been talking to him like this?" I could feel the heat rising in my face, my hands shaking now. I could barely hold the phone in my grip. "How long have you been planning this, Rachel? How long have you been lying to me?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I saw the hesitation. She wasn't prepared for that question, for me to call her out in that moment. I was supposed to just accept her explanation, her vague excuses about needing space and figuring things out, but it wasn't enough. Now when I saw the proof right there in front of me. I wasn't lying, Jake," she said, her voice cracking just a little, but I didn't buy it. "Not now. It wasn't like that. I didn't want to go this far. I wasn't planning anything with him, I swear." I shook my head, a laugh escaping me. Not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of the situation was too much to process. "You're telling me this just happened?" I stepped forward almost too fast, the anger rising to the surface. "You're telling me you didn't know this was coming? You didn't know you were falling for someone else? You didn't know you were planning futures with him?" Her eyes flicked down to the floor. "Jake, I didn't mean to hurt you," but the words felt empty. The apology was hollow, and I couldn't stop the bitterness that flooded my chest. Then why do I have to find out like this? Why am I sitting here reading your text to him, seeing that you've already moved on? What's left for us? She looked at me, her expression softening, but it didn't make anything better. "It's complicated," she murmured. "I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to hurt you." I stepped back, shaking my head. The room felt small, too small for the tension swirling around us. "No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to tell me it's complicated when you've already decided. You don't get to tell me you didn't want to hurt me when you're already with him in your mind." The silence between us stretched. She didn't speak. She just stood there, waiting for me to process the weight of what had just happened. But how could I process this? How could I make sense of what was going on when everything felt like it was crashing down at once? The betrayal was suffocating. She wasn't just emotionally checking out of our relationship. She was already making plans for a new one without me in it. "I didn't think you were going to find out," she said quietly after a long pause. The words were almost too quiet, like she regretted saying them, but I couldn't unhear them. "I thought I could figure things out without dragging you through it. But I can't lie to you anymore." Lying. She had been lying to me this whole time. She had been hiding this other life that I had no idea about until now. I had trusted her. I had given her everything, my love, my time, my plans for the future, and she had kept this secret from me. I could feel the sting of that realization digging into my ribs, making it hard to breathe. "You're right," I said, my voice cracking. "You can't lie to me anymore. Not after everything I've seen. I looked down at the phone again, at the messages that burned into my brain, at the future she had planned with him. I felt like I was looking at the wreckage of my life. You've already made your decision. You've already moved on. You're just too scared to admit it. Rachel's face crumpled at the words, and she reached out for me, but I stepped back again, my chest tightening. Don't touch me. I can't do this. Not like this. The room felt colder, emptier than it ever had before, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew it too. There was no fixing this. There was no way to go back to the way things had been. She had already chosen him. She was already in that future with him, while I was left standing here, holding the broken pieces of what was supposed to be our future. I took one last look at her, trying to find the woman I had loved so deeply, but she was gone. Maybe she had been gone for months, and I had just been too blind to see it. I'll go, I said, my voice quiet now. You don't need to explain yourself. It's clear where your heart is. It's not with me. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, anything, but in the end, she just stood there, watching me walk away. And I knew that was it. There was nothing left to say. I grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, not bothering to look at her again as I left the apartment, slamming the door behind me. As I stepped out into the night, the cold air hitting my face, I thought about what had just happened. What she had said, what I had read. The life we had built together was now nothing but ashes in my hands, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after what I'd seen. And as I walked away from the place that had once felt like home, I realized that sometimes knowing the truth hurt worse than anything else, but also set me free. Part 2. I didn't know where I was going when I left her apartment, but I had to get away from that place, from her. I needed space to think, to process what had just happened. The streets were quieter than usual, the night air crisp, but I didn't feel any better for it. My mind was a blur of thoughts, replaying everything Rachel had said, every word that came out of her mouth, but none of it seemed to matter anymore. The weight of what she had done was too much to ignore. I ended up at a bar a few blocks away. It was the kind of place I used to go to with my friends when I needed to blow off steam. The lights were dim, the atmosphere comfortable in its usual way. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and then just stared at it for what felt like hours, barely touching it. The glass of whiskey was cold against my hand, but I didn't care. I wasn't drinking to forget. I didn't think I could forget anything tonight. I was just numb. I had known Rachel for 4 years. We met in college, both studying in the same program, both figuring out our lives, but it didn't take long before we clicked. Everything about us felt right. The first time she laughed at one of my dumb jokes, I felt like I had found someone who got me in a way nobody else did. We spent weekends binge-watching TV shows, talked about our futures, even had the conversations about marriage and kids. Hell, we talked about buying a house together one day, about what kind of dog we'd get. I believed every word she said, every promise she made. But now, looking back, I saw the cracks I had ignored. I saw how she had slowly started withdrawing, emotionally distant at first, then physically distant. The late nights, the unexplained time away, the little things that never quite added up. I had thought it was just stress from work, or maybe I was just being paranoid. But I should have listened to my gut. I should have asked the hard questions sooner. I should have noticed the signs. Instead, I let myself be blinded by the belief that things were fine. She told me she loved me. She told me I was the one. But in the end, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for her. I checked my phone again, half expecting another message from Rachel, but there was nothing. Not a word. Maybe she was giving me space, or maybe she just didn't know what else to say. I didn't want her to text me. Not really. But a part of me hoped she would. A part of me still wanted her to fight for us, to tell me it was all a mistake, that this was just a phase she was going through. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. The words from earlier, the way she looked at me, the way she was already making plans with him, told me everything I needed to know. She was already gone. I stayed at the bar for another hour, but eventually, the silence became unbearable. I needed to get out of there. I paid my tab and walked out, the cool air hitting me like a slap. The streets felt even emptier now, and I found myself walking aimlessly, not really caring where I was going. I didn't want to go back to the apartment. I didn't want to go home to the place that had once felt like our home. I ended up at a park not far from the bar, sitting on a bench and staring up at the stars. The city lights were too bright to see anything clearly, but I tried to focus on the little bit of sky I could see. It was cold, but I didn't care. The numbness in my chest was more than enough to drown out everything else. I kept thinking about Rachel's words. I can't help how I feel. The way she said it, like it was an excuse, like her feelings were an unstoppable force. But what about my feelings? What about the years we had spent together? The trust one had given her? Didn't that count for anything? I pulled out my phone again and went to the text thread with Rachel. I had saved all of her messages, every sweet word she had sent me, every text that made me believe in us. I scrolled through them, each one a painful reminder of how much I had invested in this relationship, how much I had loved her. The last message I sent her still sat there, unanswered. I can't believe you've already moved on. I don't know what to do with this anymore. I don't even know who you are anymore. I didn't know what else I was expecting from her, but I didn't get an answer. Not then. Not that I was ready to hear it anyway. I couldn't deal with it. Not tonight. My mind kept drifting back to the texts I had seen earlier, the ones between her and him. I wondered if she had been planning this for months, if she had already made up her mind, but hadn't had the courage to tell me. I couldn't stop wondering what he had that I didn't. Mark, the guy who was somehow already in her life in a way I never saw coming. I try not to think about it too much, but the questions kept coming, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Was he really better than me? Was he what she needed all along, the person I could never be? I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually I stood up, feeling the cold bite at my skin. The night felt endless, like it was stretching on forever. The city around me was alive, but I felt completely detached from it all. I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol, the shock, or the hurt, but I felt like I was in a dream. None of this felt real. It didn't feel like my life anymore. I took a deep breath and sent one more text to Rachel. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because I needed to hear from her to get some kind of closure, to know that I hadn't completely lost her yet. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to let go. I don't know what to say anymore. But please, don't tell me it's over. I can't believe this is happening. I need you to talk to me. Please. I didn't expect an immediate response. In fact, I didn't expect a response at all, but it felt like the right thing to do. I needed to reach out, even if I was afraid of what she might say. It didn't matter. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. I shoved my phone back in my pocket and started walking again, this time with more purpose, more direction. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in a place where everything had fallen apart. I had to keep moving, even if I didn't know what was next. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew it was over. I knew that what we had was gone, that I was holding on to something that wasn't coming back. But tonight, I wasn't ready to face that. Tonight, I just needed to keep moving.